So to all our wonderful listeners out there, Isiah is a wonderful couples therapist, sex therapist, sexologist, and coach. And she is one of the most qualified and sought after relationship and sex experts in Australia. And you also have your own column on news.com as well, don't you?
Yep, I do. I have a weekly advice column that I write with news.com.au.
Fantastic, great. And so Isiah, you've been doing this for over a decade now. What made you get into this? Because I guess the topic of love is one of the most hardest topics on earth. Would you agree?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. And sex is something also that we so rarely talk about it. I think there's so much confusion and so much taboo that can go with talking about both relationships and sexuality, but they are so important in our lives. So my journey with this really began about 15 years ago when I kind of found Tantra. And for anyone who hasn't heard of Tantra, it's like the sexy kind of yoga. It's really a spiritual practice, but it also has incredible benefits for our sex lives. And Tantra really changed my life. It helped me become more comfortable with my body, which I had never felt before. It gave me really practical tools for enjoying sex more and really helped me kind of deepen the intimacy in my relationships and create the kind of meaningful connections that I had really been looking for. So I loved what I was learning and I wanted to share it. I ended up teaching Tantra, never thinking it would actually become a career for me. But as I journeyed in my work with sexuality, I realized what an incredible difference it can make to our lives. And I wanted to learn everything possible to help people in the areas of sexuality and relationships. So I went on to become a therapist. So I'm a relational psychotherapist, I'm a sexologist and a sex therapist, and also a trained couples therapist now as well. So it's been an enormous journey, but it's one that I'm so grateful for because it really does make such a difference in our lives.
Yeah.
So Tantra really is, it's kind of a form of yoga. And so we see a lot of practical tools in Tantra around breathing, muscle contractions, different kind of practices that you can do. One of the things that I really loved when I went to study more clinically, and I was studying at Sydney University, as well as Curtin University in Perth, was how many of the practical tools I was being taught in more Western sexology and sex therapy were tools that I had already learned as I was teaching and practicing Tantra. So it's very, very ancient wisdom, but is still really, really relevant today. And then when I went and studied both my masters at university, I was really able to kind of discover the science behind so many of those practices, which I just love.
Yeah, fantastic. And as you said, like Tantra is an amazing way to just get that deeper connection with your partner, and a good way just to put time aside for sex and put that intention towards your partner as well, I guess.
Absolutely. It's a beautiful practice. And whether or not people decide to learn and practice Tantra, all of those things that you mentioned, being really present with each other, setting aside time, making sex special, kind of making it a ritual, are all really, really beneficial to your relationship and sex life.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I have some questions for you. Most of them are from the audience, so I've thrown some of those in as well. I wanted to start with, where are we? So I'm just looking at my notes. Okay, so as you know, at this time, there's a lot of people dating on the dating apps and things like that. And people are dating different people and then dating multiple people. I've seen this on your social media as well, so I wanted to delve into it more. When you do start to like someone and you feel like you want to move things forward with that particular person, or you want to go steady or whatever you want to call it, how do you have those conversations? Because I guess people can find it quite hard because you don't want to feel rejected in case they don't feel the same, or you don't want to feel like you want to push them away as well. So how can you have these conversations with these people?
Great question. I think one of the most important things that we really have to remember is that you're only going to scare the wrong person away. You're going to scare away someone who isn't ready for the kind of commitment and communication in a relationship that you deserve. So we often hold off having the conversation because we don't want to seem too much, but then we never end up getting clarity, and we can kind of be strung along in these relationships that are actually never going to go anywhere, whether or not we move the relationship along by having the conversation. So I think that's the first thing to keep in mind. You deserve clarity, and you're only going to scare the wrong people away. I think, we can say this kind of really, really simply and stay really empowered when we're having this conversation. It can be as simple as, you know what, I'm really enjoying hanging out with you. And I'm not into dating multiple people at once. It's just not my style. So I'd like to be exclusive with you. Is that something you're open to? How do you feel about that? And so we're really clearly stating our own desires, but we're also not pushing the other person into something. And if they say they're not ready for it, it's totally okay for us to say, you know what, I totally respect that. We cannot take it personally, but you know what, that's not what I'm looking for right now. So if you need some time to have a think about this, go ahead, but just know that I might not be there once you've decided. It's a really empowered way of letting someone know what we want, and also holding our boundaries.
Exactly, holding the boundaries. Okay, thank you. Another question that I wanted to delve into with you as well, and I've never heard of this before until, as you know, I was doing a little bit of searching on your social media, the 4 horsemen.
Yeah.
Talk about this. So for me, a big point for me is how to argue effectively with your partner. And I know there's different, I know, especially if you're getting into a relationship with someone that's already come from a broken marriage and vice versa, and they've had their traumas and you have your traumas, and it's trying to work on those together and triggers and things like that. So those arguments are coming in from here, here, and here. So what are some ways that you can argue effectively and communicate effectively, I guess?
Got it. So the 4 horsemen are really, really interesting. The 4 horsemen are 4 communication styles that have been proven to basically erode a relationship. So where the 4 horsemen are present, we can predict with over 90% accuracy whether a relationship will fail or succeed. What the research has really shown us is that it isn't what couples are arguing about, it's how they argue about it or how they discuss it that makes a difference. And so it's really, really important that when we're having discussions, even difficult discussions, even heated discussions, even discussions where we're feeling anger or a lot of emotion, that we do it without using communication techniques like the 4 horsemen. So we want to avoid criticizing the other person, judging their character or their actions. You're so lazy, you never care about me, you're inconsiderate. All of those things are criticism. And when we get criticized, the way that we usually respond to that is with defensiveness. No, I'm not. Well, you are too. Well, you do this other thing as well. And defensiveness is another one of the 4 horsemen. So all of these horsemen tend to lead to the next. One of the other 4 horsemen is stonewalling, which is when we shut down and where we might be present physically, but we're not really present. We're not really listening to the other person, or we might just simply walk away from the conversation. Now, we often do this because we're trying to stop the argument escalating.
One for sure. Yeah.
Absolutely, but usually it just makes the other person more agitated because they don't feel like they're being heard, and then ultimately no one gets their
solve it right then and now. Yeah.
Exactly. And the final style is contempt, which is where we kind of resort to hitting below the belt. It's name calling. mocking, sarcasm, being really mean and nasty with someone. And that usually happens when there's been this long buildup of people not feeling heard in the relationship, and a real kind of erosion of the friendship and love and appreciation in the relationship as well. So in terms of how to communicate in an effective way with each other, I think there's two things that I like to share that are really, really important. The first one is emotion. The second one is need. So when we're communicating something, again, even if it's something that we might feel upset about or angry about, if we can speak from I and share our emotions and our needs, it's going to be much easier for the other person to really hear and understand us. So when we see dirty clothes on the floor, instead of saying, oh my God, you're so lazy, you're always throwing things on the floor, we can say, you know what, I feel really frustrated when I see those clothes on the floor. I have a need for a harmonious household. And we can also follow that then with the request, can you please put your clothes in the basket? But if you just focus on emotions and needs, that is going to have such an impact in your communication.
And I guess sometimes it's kind of hard to pinpoint that emotion to be able to communicate that as well.
It takes a lot of practice and a lot of self-awareness. It isn't something that we're normally kind of practiced at, really. It's not something that we're very often encouraged to do. So learning these new ways of communicating, learning how to check in to our emotions and recognize what our needs are, absolutely takes some time and practice to get used to.
Okay, fantastic. Okay, next question. This is a good one. What are some ways to aid moving from a broken family to a healthy, positive co-parenting team?
Yeah, really, really great question. That's a really, really challenging
You see it,
trend.
yeah, you see it a lot. Well, not, I wouldn't say these days, but probably in any case. But people breaking up, you have the broken family, and the children are, getting punished because some people are not really don't have the maturity to put themselves aside and leave the kids out of it, and they're getting mixed up in amongst the whole arguments, and it's heartbreaking.
Absolutely. And this is something that I often end up discussing in therapy with couples as well. While most of the couples that end up coming to couples therapy stay together and have a really improved relationship, some couples get to a point where they just decide it's not in their best interests and the best interests of the family for them to stay together in an intimate relationship, that there needs to be a transition in that relationship to co-parenting. I would say the really, really fundamental thing in here is, just like in any relationship, it's communication and learning how to communicate with each other and how to really hear each other, because that is such a big part of communication effectively. Now, there might also be some past hurts in the relationship that need to be resolved so that that resentment and tension doesn't keep coming up in your arguments. And sometimes there needs to be a kind of a looking for appreciation for the other person, and and even potentially looking for friendship with that person as well. I know that isn't always possible. So communication is really, really where to start on that. And I think the other thing that I would say to people making that transition is, don't be afraid to get help around this. There are people out there, therapists, couples therapists, mediators, who can really help you have these difficult conversations. And sometimes just having a neutral third party present can really help you speak in ways that you haven't to each other before. And it's such a worthwhile investment really in your family, because as you said, everyone is going to be impacted by the relationship of two co-parents. So don't be afraid to reach out and get help.
Exactly. Okay, thank you. And I wanted to ask you, what are probably your best 3 tips on building a healthy relationship with your partner?
So I won't share 3 tips, but I'll actually share what the 3 key areas are to a healthy relationship. The first one is connection. It's just so important to have friendship, connection, time together, appreciation for each other in your relationship. And that's really the foundation of your relationship. The level of connection that we have impacts communication, which is the next key area of a relationship. When we're not connected, our communication is more likely to be negatively impacted by that. So, learning more about ways to communicate effectively, really looking to understand each other and take on each other's perspectives, even if you don't necessarily agree with it. Those two, connection and communication, again, really form the foundation that then allows you to work on sexual intimacy. And sexual intimacy is another important component of relationship for most people. And absolutely, there are people for whom sexuality is not important, people who are asexual. However, I would say that if sex and sexual intimacy is important to your partner, it has to be important to your relationship as well. So you need to find ways to discuss that and to enjoy that together. And those three areas then become like a really positive cycle. So having great sexual intimacy together feeds back into your connection, which feeds into communication, which then has you feel more open to sexual intimacy together.
Exactly. Okay. And when you're talking about communication and connection, especially when you first start dating someone, and anyone that knows me knows I'm crazy about love chems and things like that. And I wanted to ask you, when you first meet someone and you have these crazy chemicals going on and you kind of feel blindsided, so are those chemicals to be trusted, or is the connection actually there, or what's going on there?
Oh, that is really it's so complex. Here's what I'll say is, I think we can't trust those feelings alone as being in love with someone or the sign that it's going to be an amazing relationship. It may go with some great relationships because, there is a whole chemical reaction that happens, and so sometimes those relationships can lead to a healthy, longer-lasting relationship. It isn't necessarily a part of every happy, healthy, long-term relationship. For some people, it's more of a slow burn. So if you are in a relationship that's feeling like a slow burn, don't necessarily think that something is wrong with it. And conversely, if you have all of these feelings and it's like, oh my God, there's just so much chemistry, that isn't necessarily the sign that it will last on an ongoing basis either. So one of those chemicals, hormones that we release in that in love phase is called oxytocin. Now, oxytocin is a bonding hormone. It helps us feel bonded and connected to someone, but it also has a huge impact on our willingness to trust someone. So they've actually done clinical studies with oxytocin that show when someone is artificially given oxytocin, they're much more likely to trust someone and to, for example, hand over money to someone who clearly isn't credible. And so you have to imagine that this is happening early in relationships where there's a whole lot of chemistry going on. So our judgment is a little bit skewed when we're in that in love phase. I would always say during this phase, tread carefully and make sure you're looking for other signs that the relationship is going to be a good one, and that those little red flags that come up, make sure that you're not ignoring those as well.
That's a good one. Okay, thank you so much. Thank you, Kimmy. Isiah, sorry.